So last week I said, after we spoke about the big mitzvah of davening for a chayla and how much we need to feel each other's pain, the Zlochov controversy, which happened Tov Kuf Tzadik Vav, that is exactly 190 years ago. So there was a person desperately ill in Zlochov, and Zlochov is not far from Brod. And this person heard that the Belzer Rav, Reb Sholem Belzer, Shabbos and Brod. So he asked his family, please send a kvittel to the Rebbe. He should daven for me. And they wrote a kvittel, and they hired a Jew to make the journey. Obviously, he didn't have a Tesla, but he got on a horse-driven cart. He made his way to Brod, and the Rebbe got the kvittel. And Reb Shlomo Kluger heard about this, and he was fuming and raging. And in Shalosh Teshuvos V'chartu B'chaim, we find a tshuva. Already, I apologize. One moment. Okay, Mom is back. Actually, 050. Okay.
Why did he ask the guy to write it and to deliver it?
Why did he have to what?
Why did he ask the guy to write it?
And he said,
Why not?
Because at least it's only a mere lachman, and it's better than a yid writing on Shabbos.
No,
He said the yid wrote it, the yid delivered it. Why didn't they ask? That's what he said. Yeah, you delivered it. Yeah, but why did the guy do it? There's only Shiloh here.
But they put the truth back on. So you tell me that the obvious question was, why did they go back into it? Put the truth back on, Pesach. Obvious question is why they didn't just do. It's a please don't argue. Let's learn the schus of the chayla. If you want to say to him, please do so. By the way, I want to remind the Olam that after the Rav finishes, I don't know if there'll be a gap or not, but after Rav finishes, it's scheduled for 12 o'clock, but maybe it'll start earlier. Going to Moshe Scheiderman will be here in person. I hope the Olam shows up. So far, you'll find out. So far, we have more people online than we have in person, but we will try to even it out. Anyway, so somebody's asking, why did they make the Jew write to Kameya? Why did they have the Goy write to him? Maybe emotionally, viscerally, they didn't feel that they wanted a Goy to write a Kameya for the Rebbe. What?
He said if some man is upset, we don't know why.
Because he wrote one and he.
No, they're asking.
It wasn't a kameh, it was a kvittel.
Why did they get the guy to write it? I know we're not here. With this story, we know already. This story is a famous story. It's settled. We know basically the facts, but this is the Taka Kasha, which is obvious Kasha. Okay, anyway, Lichtem Shabbos Kvittel V'Shisha Yehudi. Wow, this is tough language. Shisha, you guys are going to Brashusha Deraisa. Okay, Ubesusim Shal Yudim, I guess, Adacha Iser, Ushlichas, Weiss, Pusat Chum. As we got if he died away, Efshel Abai, Pekam Valacha, Slecha Denach. Oh, he said it himself. Okay, there you go. And they said, money along what for a pigeon? There you go. So that's what really set him off. If they would have done the minimum Mela, but to do this with everything, all the bells and whistles, that's really crazy. Emes here is Emes Hayira Zul Bekalkelas Mitchulasim Hayra Azul. It's a misprint. Bekalkelas Mitchulasim Ba'id Ba'id. Gat me did the person could have just have like hit the racker for so there Katava. I'm there she move you do with the glove. There Nisim Tefilla. Give me the yellow, please. Later to show for the feel you have a spell care. There you go. The biggest mispal in the history of Klal Yisrael. The Shabbos Shlit Chayes more there. Shadar Avil Berachon Rabbanim Kasher Deraisa.
Was there Shlomo Kluger in anti-chassid?
Was he aware?
Anti-chassid?
Yes, she was very much so.
Very much so.
The Ayid Question was he a chassid? The answer is no, he was a big mistake. I person that's what tzaka pershash is a cycle of answer well as well. Till later tzaka shein on the tuchal kashi in shvat shel zel tzak le b'shabbos. Get to research for evidence. If you have shas from Yeshu, the
לא, אני
comments
בטוח. מישהו עושה את זה.
ba neda basrayu yasku the yas. After tour, hey, visa.
Okay.
Back to the top. Back to the top, Pesach. Okay.
Okay, so now, Baruch Hashem, I took care of the pikuach nefesh. I did whatever I had to do. So now we're into it. So, a Jew was sent, they wrote a kvittel, they sent a kvittel to the Belzerov. And Reb Shlomo Kluger was the Gadol Ador, and from Reb Shlomo Kluger's Shuva, it seems to be that they wrote a kvittel on Yedei Yisrael, and they were over on a Malacha Diuraisa. Not only a Malacha Darabanan. Obviously, they thought a guy can't write a kvittel. A kvittel to a Rebbe must be written by Kedusha. So they had a Jew write this kvittel, and Reb Shlomo Kluger writes, the Rav that gave a heter needs to get up in public, retract, and apologize, and say openly and in public, Dvorim, She'amarti lachem tos hol biyodi. And if he can't do that, then he needs to be fired and never again could be a murderer. And that is quite a harsh approach. So, was this an accepted psak or not? This is the Zlochev controversy. I would skip number 2 and we'll come back shortly. Number 3 is also a fascinating historical document. So the Marsham was the Gadol Ador, one generation after Reb Shlomo Kluger. And he was also Megiddola Galicia. The Galiciani Gedolim were, in that era, the greatest poskim. And the Marsham deals with the question, could you send a telegram on Shabbos L'Tzairech Choila? And when we read this tshuva, same story all over again. They wanted to send a telegram to a Rebbe Shahoif that the Rebbe should daven for a sick person. And we find tshuvas in Shoylem Eshev written to the Beis Yitzchak, to Rabbi Yisroel Shmelkes, and they deal with the question, is it mutter to send a telegram on Shabbos? They don't mention it was a Tzarech Chayla, but the Marsham was aware of this correspondence, and the Marsham says they both agreed that there would be no heter, and sending a telegram on Shabbos would either be a Malacha D'Oraisa or the Rabbanan. So I suggest 5 lines down in Tshuvas Marsham. If we could have it on the screen, I would appreciate it, because I don't think the source is on the screen right now. Are you with me? Do we hear each other and see each other, my friends?
Yes, and there are source material on the screen.
Perfectly. The Marsham is coming up right now. They're on the screen. Does the Rav see it?
No, I need to.
I don't understand why.
Oh yeah, yes. So, which is an interesting way to write things. I just want to tell you that the Marsham was a chassid, and he was a Zilitchoy v'chassid, a Rishon chassid. למאמינים בצדיקים, יש לו מידה וכמו כמו פיקוח נפש, דמות הלכה לשבס אפילו בסתויר, מכל שכמשבוס. ובתשובה אחד הלכתי בדין, דמות הלכה לשבס ודובר שאינוי בטבע. So we all know that you're machal Shabbos for medicine. Chodesh yesh v'sekona, we're machal Shabbos. Chodesh v'sekona eats on Yom Kippur. But there's a big controversy. Could you be machal Shabbos for a chodesh yesh v'sekona in something that is not natural, biological phenomenon? And that's a big, big controversy. But if we go down 2 lines, Shalish Tshuvas Chaim Shoal, Chelik Beis Simen Lamed Ches, V'Kisei Rachamim Al Mesechet Soifim. These 2 Svarim are the same Mechaber, and that is the Chido. Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai, one of the greatest Gedolim. He lived in Yerushalayim, and he wrote many, many Svarim. So these 2 Svarim are from the same Mechaber. Tshuvas Chaim Shoal, Kisei Rachamim Al Mesechet Soifim, and he brings Rabbeinu Peretz, one of the Baalei HaTosfos, Kosov Kameya Leyesheves Al HaMashbeh B'Shabbos. He himself wrote a Kameya. V'gam HaRama. The Rama was Rameya Abulafia, one of the greatest Rishonim. Hitter Lichtev Kameya B'Shabbos I Ismachet Gavre V'Kameya. So a Kameya might be different, because there's a huge Sugya Mesechet Shabbos Tav Samach, Kameya Mumche. You could go out to the Shus HaRabim. Chazal recognize the power of Kameyas. Here we're dealing with the Broch of a Tzaddik. Uvdei Yadan, Be'ir Moladeti B'Zlotchov. The Masham writes, I was a young man, and this is my hometown. I was in Zlotchov at the time. And I remember the story, Cholim Mesukin Aboises Manoya Moiri Verabi Agona Kodesh Marash Mebels. He was a chosed of the Bells thereof as well. Meshoif se Shabbos Kodesh Bebrod. V'tir dain echod lichtov al yedei goy b'Shabbos Kodesh shema choyle ve'imoy v'sholach lebrod. V'hir ish agon marshak u'posel asadayin mela'oirosoi. There is some discrepancy here, because according to what the Marsham remembers, it was a guy that wrote the Kvittel, but in Uvechartu B'Chaim, Reb Shlomo Kruger writes that a Yid wrote the Kvittel. But the Marsham remembers the story. וכבוד מורי ורבי הגאון הקודש ענן נסליים גם כן על הכויסה ואומר, עכשיו אני מחויב לסאמס, שיעשה גחוי לרפואה שלו יוגרם על ידו חיל שבס, וכן הויו שנסלם. So, I just have an interesting comment. In the dilemma of Pikuach Nefesh, it really makes no difference what the result was. When we are Machana Shabbos for a Pikuach Nefesh, does it make a difference whether we saved a life or not? A paramedic is called. There was a traffic accident. A Jewish boy was hit by a car. And he comes to the scene. He does his best. And to our terrible sorrow and dismay, the boy dies. Would that be considered Chil Shabbos? Whenever we do Chil Shabbos for Pikuach Nefesh, it makes no difference whatsoever whether we were successful or not, what the result is. We did what we had to do. And Pikuach Nefesh Derech Shabbos, and Pikuach Nefesh Derech Shabbos, regardless of whether it helped or not. Now, I don't doubt the credibility of the Masham. The Masham was Ga'ona Ga'onim, the greatest posek of his time. But, when we tell a story is a story. And yes, the Belzerov said, wow, now it's up to me. I need to see that this person has a Pushlema. But not that it really makes any difference whether he would have a refuah or we would not have a refuah. So on one hand, the Masham writes, if you believe in Tzaddikim, and obviously the Masham believes in Tzaddikim, he writes, Moiri v'Rabbi Agon HaKodesh Mebels. But then in the last line, and this is interesting, Ubekol kai gavna ein lo'okol befrat bedor hazeh, ein lo'okol mekam etamim. But he doesn't want to go into detail, and he doesn't share with us why. The Masham wrote just a few lines before that even a Malocha Dioraisa would be permissible, because this would be considered as Pikuach Nefesh. We believe in Tzaddikim. So I don't know. He leaves it up to us to guess. But he says, Befrat bedor hazeh ein lag. Bedor hazeh goes back 150 years. And many times we are led to believe that the world of yore was a perfect world, but it was not. It wasn't a perfect world. In many ways, it was better than our world today. And many times I jokingly said, whatever we have in Chefzeh the Mitzvah is more Ma'udah today than it ever was. The average younger man can have an estig more beautiful than the Baal Shem Tov's estig and the Gro's estig. Eidevin today are 1,000 times more lechatchila than the best Eidev in Warsaw or in Vilna. Our mikavois today are more Ma'udah than they ever were. Our Sifrei Torah are far more beautiful and Ma'udah than Sifrei Torah 100 years ago. Besides the people, everything is better today than it was. The tmimis of our forefathers is gone today. We have a lot of London, but they push it to tmimis the kid Mesiris Nefeshim that were maminim ubnei maninim, and they were meiser nefesh to go to the mikveh in the cold winter mornings. That is no longer with us. But anyway, so the Masham writes, "Befrad bedora ze ein lahakol," and we need to guess why not. Im meikar hadin, the Masham feels it's pikuach nefesh. So today everybody has his own tzaddik and everybody has his own tzaddikim, and you cannot dispute what people believe. And the Masham, obviously, 150 years ago saw this as a perza. But anyway. So that was the story in Zlotchev that Shlomo Krug was very against. Now we go back to the previous source.
But the Mashal doesn't puzzle it. I mean, he, as the Rav said, he gives this somewhat ambiguous lemabinim. So
right. But he writes, Ein lahokol, just trust the Kodesh Baruch Hu and daven to Hashem. I think the feeling is, if we're dealing with Tefilla, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu looks into our heart, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu knows, we wanted a tzaddik to daven, but the Kodesh Baruch Hu is a baruch kolayis whatever. The Kodesh Baruch Hu could send it for even without the Rishon and Belz's bracha. Kaf HaChaim. So the Kaf HaChaim was one of the greatest Sephardi Gedolim. Kosaf Pesach Hadviyah. And the Pesach Hadviyah tells a similar story that happened 22 years before Zlotchev. And it happened in a Sephardi community. Maser she'ira b'zman ha'megeifa b'shnas tov kuf ayin dalet shenigafru v'miyom Shabbos kodesh b'toch ha'ir v'Shimon Ochav haya b'kfar. Shimon was somewhat far away in a town close to the city. My brother doesn't even know that I'm sick. He called a non-Jewish scribe, and so in this case, yes, it was a Mir and Achri. They sent a goy. But Reb Shlomo Kruger says he wouldn't be matter even with a goy. And the Pesach Hadvir writes, Ein beze nidnud isur. Mutar lachatchila. It was a similar story. So by Reb Shlomo Kruger was the Belzer Rebbe. But the Kaf HaChaim, he just asked his brother to organize a minyan. They should daven for him. So Reb Shlomo Kruger says, no heter whatsoever. Kaf HaChaim quotes the Pesach Hadviyah, was one of the Sephardi Gedolim, and he says, not even a nidnid isur. So we scroll down, and we come back to the story of the Kameya. And the story of the Kameya comes back to the Berkei Yosef. Masa be'ish echad shemotzas gula achas b'seif eksav yad ma'odol godol me'arishoyim. And the Chidah says a person found a sgula, actually a Kameya. And the Kameya worked to save people that drank poison. And it worked a few times. Vayehi hayoim, Leil Shabbos Kodesh Iru Shenari Yisrael Shotos Usama Moves. Letchila Rodvei Kemisa. and she went into shock, multi-system failure, and it was obvious that her life is in immediate danger. And this person wrote a Kamaya, and he wrote it, not a goy. This story, the Jew wrote the Kamaya, and it worked. And miraculously, she became well. And then there was a big outrage and uproar. Was that Chil Shabbos or not? And the Birkei Yosef goes into very famous discussion. Refuah she'eino tivis, refuah zgulis. Is there a heter to be Machal Shabbos for a refuah that is mystical, not biological? It's not b'derech hateva, but mystical. And the Chido brings various different sources. Could we scroll down to see the bottom of this discussion? And he brings different sources, lakan ulachan. Benedidon loy shore richtevs gile zula hatzal mamoves asher samloy. And that is a surprising conclusion. We saw the Kaf HaChaim and the Marsham brings it to Rabbeinu Peretz. One of the Manatoises wrote a Kameya himself. And obviously, this was a Kameya. It's the same story. So regarding with the Kameya, it's somewhat different than davening. So Reb Shlomo Kruger says, there is no heter to be over on a Marocha D'Oraisa, not even a Marocha D'Rabbanan, to have a tzaddik daven for you. Pesach Advir was Mata and Issa D'Rabbanan. The Masham says, I think it's Pikuach Nefesh. We could be Matyo. And now we have some literature stories. So we started the Shiur today with a Hasidic Shemaisa. The Chassid in Zlochev sent a kvittel to the Bel Zarav. The Masham was a Chassid. He was one of the greatest poskim. He was a Chassid. So many of you probably know the Michal Shurkin. The Michal Shurkin is a big Talmud Chacham. I know him. I know his family. He has a son-in-law in my koil, a great young man. And I think he wrote a Hararei Kedem. So many of the shiurim of Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik from Boston. And Michal Shurkin is one of his Matike Hashmua. And he writes in his Sefer a strange statement. So he tells a story about Reb Shaya Zochovitcher. I know nothing about Reb Shaya Zochovitcher, but probably he was in Lithuania, a well-known figure. So the story that Michal Shurkin tells is just an interesting story. It's not, it has nothing to do with our shiur, but you know, we have part of it on the screen. So anyway, the Michal Shurkin's Elter Baba asked a bracha from Reb Shaya Zochovitcher that the coming generation should all be shomer Torah v'mitzvahs. And Reb Shaya Zochovitcher gave her a bracha that in the next 10 generations, all her children and grandchildren should be Oram Alai. They should be poor. Because if they're poor, they'll be from. Oh, you know, I would never give a person a bracha that all his children should be poor. I know some very rich people that are fantastic people. Baalei tzedakah, shomer Torah v'mitzvahs. And I know some poor people that aren't very frum. So anyway, so the Michal Shurkin writes, the bracha was makuyim. They were all frum and they were all poor. But that's not what we're talking about. Oimerim b'shem agro, shemuta l'cha l'shabbos v'sel chodesh yezukun l'kaber b'chas l'bishaya, ki muftach shebechoset eskayim v'masa ta'asa priyim alamala. This is so strange. I must say, this is so strange. The Goen, the Vilna Goen would say you're Machal Shabbos to get a bracha from a tzaddik. I don't know. I never asked the Michal Shurkin, but to me this seems really strange. Reb Shlomo Kruger was adamantly against it, and he said that Rav could never in his life be a Moirero again. Okay, so Shmuel Yosef Miller wrote a very popular series. I think it's a 3-volume series, Uvdes Vahanhoges Lebeis Brisk. And he had numerous conversations with Reb Dovid Soloveitchik, the Briskerov's son. Hagarmad is a Meshulam Dovid Soloveitchik. So the Briskerov had a few children. Reb Dovid had a mayor. Both had yeshivas in Yerushalayim. Probably many of our group's children and grandchildren learned the brisk. That's Moran Agrach. This is what Reb Dovid Soloveitchik told the Melech. שמותר לשלוח טלגרם בשבס לצדיק שיספר לבעד חולים הסוכרים, דהרי תפילס, הם דובר היועץ המון לרפוסה של החולים, אם כן נכלה בקהל סופר כרוך נפש שדרך השבס. I thought only Hasidim give this type of psukim. So Reb Dovid Soloveitchik quotes Reb Chaim Brisker. I regret that I don't have it on our package. I just couldn't find it. But I assume that many of you heard about the Moshe Mordechai Schulzinger. Reb Shlomo, did you know the Moshe Mordechai Schulzinger?
I did.
He was one of the closest Talmidim of Rav Shach.
It was quite a colorful figure in the Bnei Brak seat, as the Rav remembers.
Oh yeah. Did he ever come to the Archikala in Yerushalayim?
No.
He was a big Ilui, a huge Talmud Chochem, a big Kanoi, controversial person.
That's the
and he writes that he asked the Meir Soloveitchik, is this true? And the Meir Soloveitchik said, Sheker v'kozov, and he's angry that they quote such a thing in the name of Reb Chaim, Loi Hoya v'Loi Nivra. Okay, so we have somewhat of a literature controversy now, after the Hasidic one. So the two children of the Brisker Rav contradict one another. Was Reb Chaim Matir to be Machal Shabbos Malocha de Ramon and said the telegraph to have it tzaddik?
Not the only time.
So Shoyel and Meshiv, slightly different touch. Shoyel and Meshiv was a contemporary of Reb Shlomo Kluger. Bishnas Tov Reish Yud Gimel. The story in Zlochev was 17 years earlier. Nishalti me'echad mipo levov. He was the Rav in Levov. Shaboli yadia she'ishtay tokov li'alme betreskovitz samach Redrovich. V'nishalti yamutel and zoa shamo. He was not at home, and it became known to him that his wife fell ill. Could he travel in Shabbos to be together with his wife? So obviously, I don't know whether it was a Malocha D'Oraisa. They didn't have cars then. So it probably was a horse-drawn wagon. But if it was Mechutz L'Tchum, Yud Beis Mil is a D'Oraisa. V'nela finias nati l'mutar. Harei mavo v'shulchanov semen shin Yud. Choyle shetukov li'alma v'vaka she'yishlech achar ahu ohavav mutar l'shloch chatz b'Shabbos kadei shelo yititrev da'atoi. So we're matar amira l'nochri for a choyle shetukov li'alma. The source of this halacha is the Mordechai. Shelo titrov da'ato. Not even pikuach nefesh. So we find various halachas. Chazal were matter for a shchiv mara to give a get on Shabbos. Shelo titarev da'ato. Tiruf hadas is not pikuach nefesh. It is just he will be so disturbed, he might become deranged. He might have a mental breakdown, a nervous breakdown. Our matter amir anachi to prevent a nervous breakdown. And the Shalom Esha brings a machlokes. Are we only matter amir anachi or matter every shus? And towards the end of the tshuva, he writes, it might even be a suffix pekuach nefesh. So, im tirtze ledas, the last three lines of this tshuva, im tirtze ledat, kama gadol koach shiv mera shechoshe shelo yititrev da'atoi, bo v'ra'ei ma shekosev harash. התירו לשחוט לחולה שיש בסכונה, אף שיש נבלה מוכן שם יקוץ החולה ויסתכן. והם כן חזינן שתירו בשביל צער החולה, וכל שכנת ישבוס בשביל צער החולה. One could argue, ein hanidon doimer arai. The Shoyla Meshav is quoting a din, a chole sheyesh b'sekona that needs to eat meat. We have nevela, or could we shecht an animal? So the Rosh says he won't eat nevela. And if he won't eat, his life is still in jeopardy. So he shecht. It's not the same as our case. What would be the heter for a person to travel to be with his ill wife? So, going back a few lines, I think we go up a few lines. His wife was in a place nobody knew her. So he writes, it's not only a chash of tiropadas, it's sofik pikuach nefesh, doiche Shabbos. Marshal.
Is the first major tshuva on psychological distress being pikuach nefesh?
No. We'll have some far more important sources if in another 10 minutes. It is an important tshuva, but it goes all the way back. The Masham is a similar tshuva to the Sholim Meshav. B'dvar Shabbos, Shabbat telegram be'erev Shabbos. Le'es Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos. Le'ishu achar sheyesh labas bebrod, v'hu rochek yud beis mil. Asher bito nechles ma'oid. This woman heard, mamish Erev Shabbos before the Shkia, that her daughter is very sick. V'mevakeshes shetovoi. Vehitel moire echod shetisa b'Shabbos. And a mother will let her go on Shabbos. And it's Yud Beis Mil, that's in the Dioraisa. The Gambi Yashaka Mezumen Mutali Yisor Achad Shabbos Abachoy Uchalav. Yes, and Rosh Hashanah. Vada Ima Tishtadel Avura Yoter Betov. So the Masham brings various different sources, and his tshuva is similar to the Sholim Meshav's tshuva. And he also quotes Tirofadas, and he writes, it would be defined as a sofik pekuach nefesh. We scroll down. So the Mashal is dealing with a Dioraisa, and he says it's Yosem Yud Beis Mul, and Yud Beis Mul is stop. Karador. הדמיין שהביא המויר ההוא דברי בוירסם ויופי השיג רם עליו. אבל בגוף הדין, יש לצדד, חיירד התוקף ליעלמה שישלחו בעד קרויב of the same source as the Sholim Meshav quotes. So the Rishonim say to the Fodas, Prima Godim says it's Sofik Pikuach Nefesh Afilu Isurei Torah Mutar. And he quotes the Sholim Meshav that we just saw. היתר למי ששומע שאשתה נחלס בכבר אחד ליסה לשם בשבס כיוון שבאוכם שהם מכירים הווי סופק פיקוח נפש. קל וחומר in our story when the daughter asked for her mother to come. So these two fundamental tshuvas, the Sholim Meshav and the Meshama, they were the greatest poskim in Galicia in their age. And they argue it's a sofik pikuach nefesh. What I want to add now is so significant. I wonder why these giants didn't quote this Gemara. Shabbos Kuf Chof Ches Amud Beis. Let's have a look at the Gemara. Very short. We're dealing with the Yeledes. And if the Yeledes says, it's too dark in here, Pshita. If it's too dark and the doctors need light, Pshita. Besumo. The Yoledis is blind. We have sufficient light, but she has impaired vision. and she's hysterical. She thinks it's dark. We put on the lights. And putting on the lights means lighting candles, and that's a malacha d'oraisa. Why? Isu v'miyaz v'data. Savra, iye kemida, chazi chaverta v'yavdali. We don't need light. We have sufficient light. She thinks it's too dark. Just to calm her down, we're over al malacha d'oraisa. And that is called Yisu v'daita. Tosfos asks, but Yom Kippur, you can't let a Chodesh Yezro Zakona eat only if doctors say it's important. And here, the doctors say it's not important. Tosfos answers, Hoche Sharia Mishum Yasiva Daita, Yoiser Yechoila Hayoleres Vestakan Erede Pachat Shetes Pachat Shema Eino Yisid Yofer, Mamashi Tzicha, Mamashi Yestaken Hachoila. So, this is a Gemara Meforeshes, and Tosfos explains, we're Machal Shabbos by Malacha d'oraisa for the calm, psychological calm of a Chodesh HaTzikun, sort of Shlomo. This is the most important source for psychological, for psychology. Yes, we're Machal Shabbos. So the mother of Rome asks, if she's blind, we could just lie to her and tell her, oh, we put on the lights, everything is okay. The Magen Avraham answers, she's partially blind. She doesn't see details, but she does see light and darkness. And it seems to her that the room is too dark and they won't be able to help her. If we put on more candles, she will see that it's lighter, there's more light. So for Yisu v'daita, we're Machal d'oraisa. So I wonder, in all these stories, if the girl asked, I want to see my mom, and she's desperate, of course I would be Mater d'oraisa, not based on the din of Shemi Yitarev Dato, the Gos Memonias. This is a Gemara Meforeshes. Yisu v'daita. Calm. So in the story of Zlotchev, this might not be relevant, because in the story of Zlotchev, we could tell the Choyle, yeah, we sent a kvittel to the Ben Zerov, and the Ben Zerov said it will be okay, and Yisu v'daita. But in the story of the Sholem Eshev and the Marsham, so the Sholem Eshev deals with the question, could the husband travel to be with his wife that's sick? Could the mother travel chutz l'tchum to be with his daughter, and the daughter asked to see her mother? And if that is a sofik pikuach nefesh, Yisu v'daita necessitates even a malacha d'oraisa. Sharas Teshuvas Minchas Osho. We only have a small part of this tshuva, but I'll tell you what it's about. First chelek Minchas Osho Simachov Dalet. Person had cancer. He lived in the 4th floor of his building, and he was bedridden, but he could go in a wheelchair. And he desperately wanted to go in Shiur Shabbos. And the question was, could he use the elevator to go down to the ground floor to make it to Shiur and Shabbos? He had a Filipino caretaker or caregiver, and he couldn't schlep that wheelchair. It was a heavy person on the stairs. It would be a sakon and he might fall. So, can you use the elevator? And I spoke about Yisu v'daita, and I said Yisu v'daita is only when a person his life is in immediate jeopardy, and that is towards end of life, or a person that is sick with a heart condition. But a person with cancer, even though it is not curable, but if he is, according to the doctors, he has a few weeks, he has a few months, I don't think Yisu v'daita would apply in that case, especially Yisu v'daita that is not really about his medical treatment. The source of Yisu v'daita is when the Aledes is afraid, I'm not being treated properly. But this is a different type of Yisu v'daita. He very much wants to go to Shiur. At the end of this tshuva, I was makel, because it's only an Issa D'Rabbanan, Amir and Anach. But dealing with Yeshuva Daita, I think Yeshuva Daita is only when a person is desperately ill and his life is in immediate danger. But in the two stories of the Marsham and the Shalom, that seemed to be the case. So I think the most important source in all these dilemmas, starting off in Zlotchev and the story with Michal Shabbos to have it Tzadik Daven for you, it is about Yeshuva Daita. And that is the most important. So let me share with you a thought. Many times in my shiur, I say, if I would live 800 years ago, this is what I would say. And usually it's a kula, but this time around it's a chumrah. The only source we have about Yeshuva Daita is a Yoledes. It would seem to me that Yeshuva Daita is only by a Yoledes and not by a Chodesh Yesh B'Sakona. And the reasoning is a very simple one. When a woman is hysterical and in panic during childbirth, it makes the delivery that much more complicated. Because in a healthy, normal baby delivery, the Yoledes needs to cooperate and push and make an effort to get the baby out. But if the Yoledes is hysterical, they probably will need a C-section. It complicates the delivery. That doesn't apply to every Chodesh Yesh B'Sakona. But the Rashba is the first one to say the heter of Yeshuva Daita applies to every Chodesh Yesh B'Sakona. So Batlu Dati Elef Alfei Pa'amim. If the Rashba says the heter of Yeshuva Daita applies to every Chodesh Yesh B'Sakona, and all the poskim follow the footsteps of the Rashba. So in the cases today, our study was primarily Shalos Tshuvos. Reb Shlomo Kruger, two different Tshuvos from the Marsham, the Sholem Meshev, and these literature stories, which are the most interesting and confusing. So at the end of the day, I think the more important factor would be the Yeshuva Daita factor. So we are Mechal Shabbos, even by the Oraisa, to just bring calm and confidence and comfort to a Choyle Sheyesh B'Sakona. And this is what he needs, and he wants it Tzadik to daven. He wants his children to come to his bedside. He wants his father to come. And that is the heter that a woman going to the hospital to have a baby on Shabbos, her husband could come along, her mother could come along, because that is Yeshuva Daita. She's afraid to arrive at the hospital alone. Who's going to help her? And sometimes she needs her mom to be in the delivery room with her. And that is the heter. And that is about Yeshuva Daita. So Chazal, with their ultimate wisdom, say that having a Chodesh Yesh B'Sakona or a Yoledes is comfortable and confident and calm, that is defined as Pikuach Nefesh, and that would legitimize Chilul Shabbos not only by Yad Rabbanan, even by a Deorais. So, my dear friends, next week Sunday.
This is the basis of the heter that the Rabbanim allow husbands to go with the wives, right?
Yes, definitely. So the husband is not a doctor, but his wife needs him there on the way to the hospital, arriving at the hospital, and even in the delivery room. It'll give her more calm, and that's the heter. The basis of the heter is Yeshuva Daita.
Is the reason that you can go to a gadol is because something guys you become powerful the time? You hold the nose of Rebbe is a tzaddik, and he's going to actually come as powerful along with his geyser?
Yeah. If I heard correctly, I'm not sure I did. We don't need the Mama Chazal Tzadik Goyz V'Kodesh Baruch Hu Makayim. The Tefillas into themselves. So the Masham writes, if you believe in Tefillas of Tzadikim, that into itself might be Pikuach Nefesh. And that is what the other Gedolim quote as well, whether it's Metal Shorten or...
Some of the Uvdais that the Rav brought are his brother, not even Tzaddik. Anybody who that person feels.
Right. Yeah, we believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hears the tefillas of everyone. That's the tshuva in the Sholem Meshev. Yeah.
And if we're going back to the Rajba, so this has nothing to do with modern science and psychology. It goes back to Suvidait and Shas and the early Rishonim, basically.
Yes,
according to the Rambam.
yes. And that is
basically your makel on such questions.
definitely, yes. I am a big maker in Yisuvidaita. But you cannot abuse this halacha. So I remember many years ago, a woman called me, could my husband come with me to the hospital? I said, yes. Could my mother come as well? And I jokingly said, with a little cynicism, if you want to make a bus and bring your neighbors to the hospital, or they should come together with you, I can't say no if it's Yisuvidaita. But be reasonable. Be reasonable. Usually when a young lady having a baby wants her mother and her husband, she doesn't really need both of them. She's just afraid her husband will be hurt if she says, you stay home and say to him, I want my mom, or her mother will be hurt if she tells her mom, I don't need you there, my husband is coming along. So in most cases, when a lady wants her husband and her mom, it's not really about Yisuvadait, it's just about Shalom Bayis. She doesn't want to hurt either her husband or her mother. So, but if it really is a case of Yisuvadait is a Gemara, Yisuvadait is a Rashba, and Yisuvadait is a Heter.
Another question that in halacha, often we find kules from benikais postpartum, which don't even exist for mu'ubrais. Would we say that this applies to people who had babies the first week after, they need their mother the first, to come help them? And then,
yes, so your letters the first 3 days is considered the chodesh sheyesh b'sakana, and she eats on Yom Kippur.
So here, even though the season has changed, and even though she's in the hospital for a day and a half, doesn't matter. She's considered a chodesh sheyesh b'sakana.
Yes, yes.
Stage.
Yes.